Good afternoon and welcome. First of all, if I haven't had the opportunity to personally meet you, I'd like to take just a moment to introduce myself. I'm Julie Bosler, and I have the honor of representing the school membership as a school commissioner. I'm a third-year commissioner, and I also serve as treasurer of the commission. And I just want you to think of today as an opportunity to get to know me a little bit better if we haven't had the opportunity to meet, but also to talk about something that, well, to be honest with you, I could talk about all day. And that is about how to strengthen our membership schools. And it's a passion of mine, and it certainly is a passion of yours, or you wouldn't have joined this call today. I also want to take the opportunity to say, if we haven't met in person, I do hope you'll consider coming to the Professional Development Conference this year. It's being held in Reston, Virginia, and it will be September 25th through the 27th. And so we'd love to have you attend. It's a great way to network, to meet other school membership, and really to get to know commissioners and each other. So I just wanted to take an opportunity to say that. One of the things I'd also like to point out is that today's webinar is being brought to you by the Program Review Committee. We're a committee made up of peers that take a look at new degree applications that come in to the commission. And so we want to have the opportunity to express a little bit about what we look for. And today specifically, we're going to talk a little bit about demonstrating program viability, success strategies if you're applying for a degree program. Think of this as like sitting down and having a cup of coffee with me and being able just to talk a little bit about this topic and to get to know each other a little better. Also, if you post questions today, don't think because I'm not answering them right away that I'm not going to get to them, because I certainly will, and staff can send out the answers to your questions. Sometimes it's like walking and talking and chewing bubble gum at the same time. If I try to do 4 things at one time, it's not always that smooth and cool. So I'll make sure to be getting to your questions and taking a look at them. So feel free to post questions, and we'll make sure that we help get those answered for you, because we want you to have a successful degree application. So that's just a little bit, again, about me and who I am, and that if you remember anything I tell you today, please know how honored I am and humbled I am to represent you as a commissioner, as a school commissioner. So, planning a degree, here we go, beginning the conversation. Well, the conversation's obviously already begun for you. You're having a conversation about a new degree, or you probably wouldn't be on the call right now. So one of the things I think always comes to the forefront is, what's the reason for your new degree? How a school decides on the degree area. These are crucial conversations. And I say crucial because they're not only conversations that you want to have among your executive administrative staff or your management, but honestly, they're conversations that involve every office in your organization at your school, your registrar, your financial aid department. So everyone has a stake in having a successful new degree program. So we're going to talk today a little bit about not keeping that a top secret in a vacuum with the people that directly work with you as your team members. We're also going to talk a little bit about the difference in what we mean in the application of internal versus external reasons for the new degree. We're going to look at a realistic work commitment from a school, and of course that realistic time frame. I think if I would tell you anything, oftentimes schools set up a unrealistic time frame. They submit a degree application, and for whatever reason their belief is that they can get that through quickly and that they can start a new degree very quickly. And I always say, think about like slowing the train down. One of the best analogies I can give you is, I think about it like a family. Think about if you decided tomorrow that you were going to add a child to your family. We're going to have a baby. We're going to try to have a baby or adopt a child. No one would ever do that without saying, how's that going to change the dynamic of our family? How's that going to change the financial planning that we currently do? How's that going to change our time commitment as a family? And how do we plan for the next couple of 9 months or 18 months or 18 years? And now, even with today's millennial, the next 24 to 27 years, although I'm hoping my daughter doesn't decide to live in my basement someday. So I think when you're really thinking about being realistic about it, you would never jump into having a child without planning ahead. But yet sometimes schools make the mistake of jumping head first into a new degree program without thinking about how it's going to impact the family, for lack of better words. So we're going to talk about some of these things today too. So I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you that this is Section 282 of the Substantive Standards. Now guys, make sure you're looking at the right standards. That's why you should always, when you're starting a new substantive change or even thinking about considering something new, that you always download the set on the acc.org website. We want to make sure you have the latest and greatest and that you're not working off of an old set of standards that maybe you had printed in a notebook. But what we're going to ask you to do in planning a degree and to consider the standards is to explain in detail the reason or basis for offering the proposed program. The key word there is detail. Oftentimes when the application comes in, we'll see a small paragraph that says, well, we sort of stumbled upon it and we decided that we were going to offer this particular proposed program because we thought it might be a good complement to the other programs in our school. I think what we're looking at in detail are these bullet points that follow. Be specific about why this program needs to be at a degree level. Now, I like to give this in an analogy. Think of having twin sons or knowing a set of twin boys. And let's say one boy is in a welding certificate program. And now the school that your one boy is going to is considering making the welding program, in addition to the certificate program, an associate level program. My question would be, why would I put one in the associate degree if they both come out at the end of the day a welder? In other words, if the training provided gets you to the end cause, which is to be gainfully employed, why would you consider putting it at a degree level? There has to be a specific reason. Perhaps it's state guided or regulatory guided or employment based. Perhaps competitors are beating you out because they have more experience. Make sure you explain that in your application. That application, depending if you're going for an occupational associate, an academic associate, a baccalaureate degree, etc. There's about 13 questions on that application. Don't be fooled by the fact that it looks like an easy 2-page application. Yes, it's straightforward, but you certainly have got to guide the ship in the fact that your answers really have to be thoughtful, thorough, and think about you writing it to an audience that knows nothing about your school, nothing about your culture. It's pretty much the same way you would write that in the SER when you're going through your self-evaluation process. Tell your story and why, and be very specific why this new degree will enhance your school. So one of the ways to do that and to explain it to the committee and to the commission is to consider a program level review. Now you can Google examples of program level reviews from everything from nationally accredited schools to regionally accredited schools, but basically there's no mad science to it. It's comparing your program that you're considering to other programs across the nation. Maybe it's other programs at the local community college, at the associate level, or at the baccalaureate level, even at a university in your own state. But it's looking to see the review of perhaps the quarter or semester credit hours it's currently being offered at, the job capabilities at the end, the skill set, the coursework. What is it that the student needs to become a successful graduate and a successfully employed citizen? The other question, I think, is how your community will be impacted by this degree. Look, you're going to have to beat the pavement to find people out there in the industry that are going to help you with this particular degree and that are going to be able to give you some external insight. We talked a little bit earlier on a couple slides ago about internal versus external, and I've got a slide that's going to outline that for you. But ask yourself, how will your direct community be impacted by this degree? And start getting industry professionals involved on the very front end. I think sometimes there's a little bit of a fear in doing that because we want to write this in a vacuum and we're afraid to let the cat out of the bag, so to speak, that we're even considering something like this. But you can't really consider this unless you have that external input coming in from the industry professional in whatever area that you're trying to create this degree for. The other thing I would ask you is, how is your proposed program different in a program review from similar programs? Maybe there's something that stands out. I'll give you a good example of that. One example would be perhaps at a community college, students are taking all of their gen eds on the front end and then taking the occupational technical courses on the back end of that program. Well, an argument can be made that the student will stay more engaged, be more successful if the curriculum were tied together and not front-loaded with gen ed, but the general education was worked in to the core classes and to the occupational classes as well. And what you'll find is that when a student is taking college algebra in their math component and also taking, let's say, for lack of better words, a welding course, we'll use welding or nursing or something like that as an example, and they're already taking a core fundamental entry to nursing course, their excitement level and their engagement level stays true to the par all the way through the program. Perhaps that's the proposed difference in your community of your program. And then again, I think, how is the curriculum different in the degree program besides adding general education? One of the hard things is trying to take a program or create a program and make, well, general education exciting. I think sometimes you'll hear students say, but I really only want to take nursing courses if it's a nursing degree, for example. And my thought always is to say, we want you to be well-rounded. We want you to be an effective citizen. But the curriculum and the tying together of it has to make sense. And it has to tie together for the student, or they don't really see the value. So I think trying to decide what makes your program different, how your community will be impacted, and really considering a comparative of your program to other programs across the United States and even in your own community will be a good way to get started thinking for the reason or the basis for offering the proposed degree program. Let's face it, when you say the words, we're thinking of offering a new degree, it tends to scare people. While it excites you and you maybe as a leader of your school, well, sometimes the people that work with you think, great, how is this going to impact my workload? So we're going to talk a little bit about the fact of not only for the student, but for your team, how that sometimes can impact and set up a wrong tone that I think you want to try to avoid from the beginning. Okay, let's pop over to another slide here, and let's talk a little bit about planning the new degree and explaining how the curriculum is consistent with the mission of the school and the school's goals and objectives. Wow, this is a big one. So this part of the application will ask how your proposed program aligns with your mission and your goals. If there's not a clear alignment between those two things, well, to be honest, it's possible something's wrong. I want you to think about the school's mission and the goals being the overarching umbrella. Think about it being the umbrella that guides everything. I often say that when people walk into their workplace, they leave every bit of baggage and everything that makes them different outside the door. And what they share in common is the mission of where they work. It's not just about earning their paycheck. It's why they work at your particular school. It's because they believe in the mission. And if they don't, they're in the wrong position. And they believe in your goals. So ask yourself how very clearly to explain. And one of the great ways to do that is to take your values that you have or your pillars. At ACCSC, we call them our strategic pillars. Perhaps you call them core values, or perhaps you call them your school objectives. Whichever way you term that, take those goals or objectives and write out how you think the aligned program meets it. Also take an existing program that's successful at your school that you're already working, you understand and know, and do the same. And look at the two table columns and look what they have in common. It's one of the easiest ways to explain it. Sometimes one of the best ways in the application to explain things doesn't always have to be a narrative. It can be a chart that you create to further illustrate. It's an excellent way to think about making your point clear and helping the commission understand where you think your proposed program is going. And then we'll ask you about the proposed program being included. These are your four favorite letters, right? The IAIP. That's that institutional assessment and planning piece. In other words, if you're starting a new program, it's got to be included in the master plan. I like to call that the blueprint that guides everything. So we're going to talk about short-term planning and long-term planning and what that looks like. So you're going to want to provide a detailed justification as how to completing this degree would benefit students. This actually directly ties into your mission. So here's something I want to talk about for a moment. And this is a part, I would say, about 40% of the applications that come in we see are being offered at the certificate level. And so perhaps it's a program and now there's, for whatever reason, which you've very detailed explained why earlier on in the application. I think that falls about question 5 in the application, about a detailed reason for the basis or need for it to be a degree. But how does taking it from a certificate level to a degree level enhance the student's ability for employment? I mean, let's face it, since July 2011, we've all become very familiar with the word gainful employment. And honestly, it's nothing new that we didn't recognize or understand from the very beginning of time. I mean, that's the whole mission of the Accrediting Commission, is to have students get skills and trained in particular topics to where they can be very skilled to go on and become really great employees at an entry-level position. It's what the whole basis of the mission of this organization is to do, is to really help students and empower them to go and do great things. So I would ask, if you are considering taking a certificate program to a degree program, what's the difference between the same or similar program? Besides adding general education, take that component out. What's the difference? Why is it needed at a degree level? And what will be different? Think about the analogy of the twin boys that we talked about. If one's going through the certificate program and one's going through the degree program, what's the end result benefit in the outcome if they're both going to get the same job? I think that's a healthy question to ask. Oftentimes that's employment driven, that's community driven. It could be veteran affair driven in the fact of funding for VA. It could be state regulated, or honestly, it could be the fact that your competitors or community colleges in the area, for example, are already pushing and doing an associate degree, and you're being left behind, and your students they're getting beat out for the same position. That all makes sense, but make sure you explain that. Sometimes I think in the degree application, people forget to tell us these crucial points, and so we're trying to understand why it is that this is so crucial to go from a certificate to a degree. And again, we talked a little bit about completing the degree. How will that impact gainful employment? How does that help that particular graduate become a gainfully employed citizen? That's really what it's all about. When I ask and I go around the United States and I speak to different groups, I'm so honored to have the pleasure sometimes to travel for the commission and to hit the pavement and to meet all of you. If I haven't had the chance, I do hope I will be able to in the future. But I'll ask, what's the number one reason you do the job you do? And here's the answers I don't get. It's the money. It's because I love to run a PAC meeting. I know you're chuckling at your desk right now, right? Actually, it's because every time I get the same answer, and it's exciting, and it makes me feel thrilled, because it's the same reason why I do my job as well, and it's because it's the student. It always comes down to the student. It's why you're passionate about what you do, and it's why you hold it close to your heart. So how does this degree impact the student? How does it make them really better themselves on the back end? That's what we're asking you. And then consider the ratio of the cost for the program versus entry-level salary. Well, now we're going to have a chat about this. Think about how much of a school loan or how much money it would cost to do the program versus my first year salary coming out. If these numbers are so far off and so few and far between, there's an issue. I'd also, and we're also going to talk a little bit later in another slide about the credit hour that you're assigning to this proposed degree program. Besides meeting the minimum, what we typically see is people sometimes include too many credit hours. And I would ask you to consider, is it worth the cost to have the extra hours but to still come out with the same job? You don't want to be a minimalist in this, but we certainly don't have to be overabundant in credit hours. A good way to gauge that, again, is to go back to a program level review and look at what people all over the United States are doing. Here's a good example. Let's say you're thinking of putting a medical assistant program on your campus. And yeah, you know some about it, but you don't know a lot. Where would be the first place you would go to find out more about what people across the United States are doing and what their quarter credit hours look like? Well, one great place to start is by looking at the ACCSC website and going and looking at the directory of people who are offering that program already. While it may not be in your community, it's already a member school that's considered offering that program and that has it approved and that's been operating that program. And that's where the networking of things like the professional development conference come into play. Pulling that person from a school aside and saying, hey, I noticed you're offering a medical assistant program. Do you have a minute to chat with me? You'd be surprised how people are very proud to talk about really successful programs at their schools, and as well as we should be. So I've kind of put this into a drawing for you. To reason for offering the program. Is the curriculum consistent with the mission? And does it benefit students? If you're putting a big check mark on all three of these boxes, then I think you're off to a really terrific start. And if you can offer a really healthy, robust reasoning and narrative or charting for these three boxes, then I think you're in a really great position to start in your application that you're going to submit to the commission. Planning really can't occur in an administrative vacuum. Now, that doesn't mean that you go and tell the entire community or your students that you're considering a new program. But I will tell you, I do see a mistake that people make is the administrative staff or management has a robust discussion about starting a program, and they start with the substantive information and they start putting the application together, and then they don't realize that the 14 people or the 10 people or even the 5 people that are in their office that do registration, that do admissions, that do financial aid, that do career placement, these offices become very panicky because they haven't really had a hand or a part in creating what that application looks like. Or better yet, they're not even sure or aware that a proposed new degree was coming to the foresight. So it starts to feel kind of dirty and underhanded if you're not careful. And I caution you about that, because if you have your team in place and you trust them and you have the right people in place, trust them to help you with the application. It makes it to where they have a hand in creating something, but it also gives them a voice. And that's the time to voice concerns like, how is this going to affect my workload? I'm already registering 250 students. What are we talking about adding? How does this look for financial aid? What am I doing in career placement? I've never placed people as an MA. It really gets your whole campus community involved. One of the ways to do that is to take the application and change the application questions. And by the way, you should do this for your self-evaluation report too when you're going through your renewal. But turn them into interrogatives. That's a fancy way of saying write them in questions. So instead of saying describe how the school does this, change it and write it to say how do we prove that we can do this? Or how does XYZ Technical College prove that we can do this? When you put it in first person and say we and call your school by name and you change it into a question, you own it. You have ownership over it, and it becomes something that everybody at your campus community owns and they can understand. So that would be my suggestion there. I think that would help you in writing that 13-question application. I'm going to talk a little bit about, in this next slide, about considering ways that we can really help you in evaluating the program viability and really helping you meet the needs. So you see these 6 things I put here in blue. Well, the reason why is because there's a question in that application that says provide, notice the word detailed again, our favorite word, but it's true, not just hit or miss, provide a detailed narrative. This is asking for a narrative regarding the following: the assessment of program viability, how the program meets the needs of students and employees, local employment outlook, the need for training, and the socioeconomic factors in the area that can affect the program's outcomes. These are so important in building this section that we're going to dedicate a slide to each one. Now, before I jump in here, I want to say across the board that when I look at with the team of people, volunteers from the membership who take the first glance before going to the commission at your application, I will tell you that a lot of people miss the boat on this. Here's why. It's hard to write a narrative when you're not 1,000% sure what we're asking you for. What do we mean when we say assessment of program viability? Well, let's talk about that for just a second. So I tried to put this, I thought it was so important that I tried to not only give you dialogue about it, but I tried to kind of give you a visual. So I'm going to jump out where you can really take a look at some of the slides, and we're going to talk a little bit about these justifications for the proposed degree program. And that's exactly how the question's written. Justify how the proposed degree program will work at your school. So number one, and we've already talked a little bit about this, fight the temptation to take existing courses as is from a diploma program in original form and reuse them. Is it possible that that might work? Yes. But what you don't want to have happen in a program viability is for an existing program to have general education layered on top of it. That's what my mom would say is a lemon meringue pie with fresh meringue on it. Still the lemon pie underneath. So what makes it different? So when we say program viability, first of all, we're saying what is it that gives you clues, or what is it that gives you confidence that this program will be successful? And by doing a viability, we use the word viability study. We're asking you for detailed information that helped you to come to the conclusion or to the assessment that this program will be healthy and robust, offered in Iowa or in Minnesota or even in Hawaii or California. The question here becomes, why does a student need to take the same course in a degree program if they're already existing courses? If they're not, where do you even start? Well, you start, again, by that program level review we talked about. So you want to look at what criteria will be used It could be that it's standards. Maybe there is nursing standards that are provided by your state, or that could be provided by a national council. It could be that there are standards in graphic design, standards in welding. What does the literature say? One of the best ways to do this, if you currently don't have a robust library, we're going to talk about that in a minute, go back to where you graduated from, either in graduate school or undergraduate, and as an alumni, use your library pass to do key searches. You have a library at your fingertips that, and a librarian that will help you as an alumni to come to some of these conclusions if you're struggling. Let's talk a little bit about the next slide. This is where a program meets the needs of students and employers. I think pretty much in the application, people have a good understanding of this. Look, the student needs training. There's been an identified need. Oftentimes, that comes from the employment world. That's great. Make sure you document that. The employer needs qualified people, and it's a win-win. The student becomes gainfully employed in a field they're passionate about, and the employer has a really great employee from a school that they trust and look forward to working with. Oftentimes, though, we don't get a lot of detailed narrative about maybe how the external employer weighed in. One of the best ways to do that is to have an initial pack. It doesn't feel normal having a pack on a program we haven't even created, but it is a requirement in the application, and it is a necessity to say, hey, if we were going to offer this program, what would we do? The more people you have from the occupational side on that, the better off you are to get a good, healthy discussion from the employment community where these students would be employed. This is that IAIP, that institutional assessment piece we talked a little bit about a minute ago. But the local employment outlook, what today do you want that student to look like today upon graduation and at initial employment? And then what would that look like a year from now, 3 years from now, and looking ahead? What we're asking you here is to think about how your program will enhance the first set of graduates and those people going forward, because the best advertisement for a new program is always going to be the first set of graduates that come out, and secondly, it's the employment community that hires those individuals that serve on your PAC members. The number one way a new program gets good feet on the ground is through word of mouth, and that's true in whatever type of program you're putting forward. And then we see this visual of community need and student training coming together like parallel ships meeting in the night, which is exactly what we want. So what are examples of internal and external? Remember, I told you at the beginning I'd give you a kind of a set of examples. This is like a checklist. Put these in a column and see if you can write a paragraph under each of these. If you can, this helps you answer that question on the application about the need for training, the need for this program. So in internal, it could be individuals already from the subject or program area that perhaps work at your school or even work at a competitor school. I say competitors loosely, meaning like the local community college down the street. You'd be surprised if you agreed to serve on a program committee for them, they would trade off with you. They're also a really good asset for general education adjuncts, sharing a set of adjuncts sometimes when you're trying to start a new degree program and you need those master prepared general education individuals. And you say, where do I find somebody master prepared or hired to teach math or English or the quantitative sciences and these types of things? And one of the best share projects is to work with a local college and say, you know what, I need a math teacher on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Looks like you might need them on Mondays and Wednesdays. What if we shared in continuing education and training them to be better teachers? They attend some with us, they attend some with you. Try to build that partnership. It really builds your gen ed faculty from the get-go. Another one could be student course feedback. Maybe students have said, you know what, we feel like we're being beat out here, or we'd like more of what we're getting. This would be true if you were creating a program that is similar to the program already at your school. It's also connections with faculty and staff who in turn have connections with industry professionals. The industry professionals don't always have to come from the director of education or the school director. It can very well come from all the people that are on your team, including your faculty or instructors. Now, external, subject matter specialists, technicians, employers, that's beating the pavement and getting those people out from the street and saying, you know what, this is exciting. I think we can build a win-win. What do you need in a auto mechanic? What do you need in culinary arts? What do you need in your restaurants? What do you need in this particular field? That's how you start to build those PAC members. Professional societies could be on the national level, could be on the regional level. And we've already talked a lot about community colleges and universities, also trade associations, alumni. And I'd also highly encourage you to contact your state regulator. Sometimes the individuals in your state have a good network. You know what? So-and-so school on the east side of the state just built this program out a couple of years ago, and they've been having good success with it. These are all people who can help provide internal and external. And then those socioeconomic factors that may affect program outcomes. Okay, so we've already talked about the IAIP and strategic goals. Gosh, that's kind of coming to the conclusion with that today, 1 year, 3 year, what does that look like? Is it the right time? I can tell you in the healthy, robust organization, that helps. Sometimes what happens is if a school has a program that's starting to die or that's failing or falling behind, the temptation might be, well, let's build a new program. It's kind of like cutting our arm off to save the body. Well, is it possible to do that? Yeah, but it's hard to build a new program when the other programs at your school are failing. So I'd ask, where is your attention going to? Is it a program that can be saved? And if it has to be taught out, and if the socioeconomic factors say that, and it's obviously that students don't need that type of level of training to be gainfully employed, that's one thing. But don't make the mistake of trying to put all your attention into a new program when other programs in your own wheelhouse aren't doing so well, because it takes a tremendous amount of commitment and time and financial structure to be able to make sure a program gets off the ground and is successful. Other factors, well, there's other approval processes and requirements that are outside of the realm of ACCSC. It's possible that perhaps your competitors have a programmatic approval for a program you're trying to put in. I would check that as well. Also look at that organization, the programmatic organization's set of standards. Make sure you're setting the program up to meet that. If you know you're going for a programmatic accreditation 2 years out, then set it up to be successful where it already meets both sets of requirements. It also deals with your state requirements. You'll notice on the application, you don't have to have state approval if your state requires ACCSC approval first. You just need to explain that in that degree application. Here's the big box right here, the clear SOC code. If you're putting together a new program and you can't find an occupational code to fit it, there's a problem. The program has to have a SOC code that's clearly identified, that you can clearly identify. And sometimes looking at the SOC code and where people are employed helps build your socioeconomic factor to make sure that those jobs are open in your community or in your region. You don't want to create a program that people have to move out of state to get a job in. That's true in the employment trends overall. That's why I keep stressing community, community. There has to be a niche in your community where it's needed, or the expectation of a student graduating and going on to another state is very unrealistic. And then again, this goes back to those objectives, strategic planning in terms of your IAIP. And that is an importance of really clearly defined outcomes. So here's a couple of sample items to consider for program viability. An overview to tie the proposed program to the college mission, where it meets students' community, and the instructional resources the school has or plans to incorporate. Look, we know some of the application you're going to complete is going to have to be written in WHEEL. We're not real comfortable about writing it that way because in the SER, we tell people when you're writing your self-evaluation report, don't write what you will do, write what you are doing. Well, this application is a little bit different. When you're writing a new degree application, you don't have the degree approved. You do have to write it in the tense. Here's what we will do. It's not that it won't be checked. What will happen if your program becomes approved is you'll have an on-site evaluation 6 to 9 months, maybe 12 months, usually 6 to 9 months, depending on the program length after the program has started. So there is a checks and balance. We'll check to make sure. The purpose of this getting started off the road is to make sure you have a very clear roadmap for us by the time a site visiting team comes to check the program and to make sure that it's robust and healthy and that it's meeting the needs of students and employers in your community. And then other sample items to consider for this piece for program viability that we're asking you to write in question 5 is the program outcomes and the program effectiveness. What are the outcomes of the program? Now, I'm not just talking about your G&E, your graduation and employment, or a testing or anything like that type of outcome. I'm talking about internal outcomes. In other words, the best way to put this is to, on a pad of paper, scribble notes, is to write a graduation cap at the top and write what you want that graduate to look like upon graduation day. Is that person going to be an advocate for the profession, a leader? What are the types of terms that the outcome, what is the actual outcome in entry-level employment that you want them to be successful to do? And that will help define your program effectiveness. You're gauging it on, do they feel like when that first class graduates, they met the program outcomes? The only way you can find that out is to assess the student upon graduation after they've begun the job and to assess the employers. And that happens oftentimes through PAC with external feedback. Okay, so sample items to consider also include IAIP. We're not asking for your entire IAIP, my goodness. We just want this, maybe include the sections of where you think there's going to be clear measurements and how you're going to measure it. It's great to do that on, depending on the length of your program, on odd years. But if you have a shortened program, a degree program that you're trying to get through, then you probably need to shorten that from a 1 to 3 year to a 6 month, 18 months, something down those lines. Consider it in months, not years. It's funny, when you put things in months to people, it makes it feel more immediate than when you put it in years. 36 months versus 3 years, 36 months seems like it's so coming up so much quicker than a 3-year time period. Also, you want to make sure that you record every bit of your PAC recommendations. Don't cheat yourself by turning in notes that are not well taken from PAC. What happens there is a poor note taker ends up trying to tell the story of what your PAC members said in an initial PAC that you put together to talk about this program. The PAC minutes need to be so full and robust that they almost need to be able to tell the story if they stood on its own 2 feet. So really make sure it's clear and relevant to the program. And then I think you want to talk about timeline of timelines which are very clear of approvals and processes that are involved. So here's something to ask yourself. What's the expected enrollment? Be realistic. You can have an enrollment in year 1, an expected enrollment in year 3, but keep in mind that until your program gets its first set of graduates on out, word of mouth is the #1 way a new program gets itself off of its feet besides employers. Is the need for the skill set or degree needed nationally? Is there a shortage across the nation? Is it regional? Or it's possible it could just be in your small town or your community, or is it bigger than that? Is it a metropolitan issue, a city? And is the field growing or is it staying static? So if the field's growing, in what ways is it growing and evolving and changing? If it's a field that is staying static, it might not be the right degree program. Think about it. Is it in the top 10 professions that's needed? And does the money that students make upon graduation justify the need for the tuition? Tuition versus entry-level salary. Again, what we just said, is it worth it? Pricing it appropriately, but also making sure that the entry-level salary isn't barely at minimum wage. There has to be a fine balance between the two. Here's another question to ask. Do you already have the correct people in place, or do you need more people? Adding a degree program to your campus not only changes the culture of your team, but it also changes the culture of your existing students. And will your school culture support the new program? If so, how? I think these are all robust conversations to have, especially with your team members. That's why not writing it in a vacuum is so essential. And I've tried to show you a visual here of that infrastructure, all those pieces coming together. It's the educational administration. You know, here's the thing. People can look at any of the standards as check boxes, okay? So I give this as an example. You can look at a standard and you can say, okay, we meet it. That's a yes, no. But really what you want to ask yourself is, how are you meeting it? In other words, what's the intent of the standard? What is it actually trying to quality check about my program? That's really at the heart of the question. Some issues that happen is in educational administration. Usually that happens with the director of education that has a lot of experience, but we don't quite have a program chair yet. It's okay not to have it yet, but consider writing the job description for the program chair. You know, it would be hard to run the entire school that you have and also be the program chair. Is it possible? Yes. Difficult? It might be. It might be that you're wearing too many hats and your time's being a little bit too divided. Your learning resource coordinator. In a degree program, it ramps up. It changes it quite differently, and students' expectation and need for research woven into the curriculum, well, it changes too. So you want to make sure that you're considering that and how robust your learning resource system is for a student. Doesn't mean it all has to be print material, but what databases do you have? What types of materials can you offer to students that make them feel confident about the research and the individual projects they're doing interwoven throughout the blueprint of their curriculum? Faculty qualifications. When you start a new program, here's a Julie Bosler tip for you. Put your best people on the front end. I say that, it almost sounds like I say not everybody's a great person. Look, your faculty wouldn't be working for you if they weren't terrific individuals. But some people are better at the teaching skill, technological parts of it than other people. And in saying that, I want to make sure that you're real clear. Your program is judged by those first entry-level classes oftentimes, and your retention is held much tighter if you have your best players on the front end. So that's a tip to consider. Your student services, making it more robust. When you add a new program and you add students in a different culture of students or even a higher number of students, students' needs evolve, they change. And one program student needs versus another program student needs can be totally different. So think about your needs in tutoring, in support systems, not only in your learning resource systems, but across the board of soft skills, of challenges that students face today across the board, whether you're a student in Colorado or you're a student in Washington, D.C. And then, of course, the facilities and equipment and your LRS. One of the best ways to gauge that is to get your PAC involved or your proposed PAC involved. They're some of the best people who can give you a real good indication about what your equipment looks like and if your facilities are up to par to today's standards. Because that's really what it's all about, is making sure your students are getting the best of the best. Now I'm going to pop out and we're going to go to the next slide. Program design and development, program length and organization, curriculum and equipment, and program evaluation. These are all things. Think about taking these boxes and actually filling them out. For example, what's the process for the design and development of the training? Remember, changing that into an interrogative. What is our process for developing the school's training, our school's training? How are we enabling students to acquire the skills necessary for their initial employment in Detroit, Michigan, or in Laguna, California? What's our detailed and organized instructional outline? And here are 4 syllabi for the program, or to begin with, and they're detailed and they're outlined. We're going to ask you for comprehensive occupational practice that meets the curriculum and that the equipment is up to date and up to par. And it's even fine to really describe that and put how much you have. Now's not the time in your degree application to be modest. Be proud of the fact that this is what you're considering doing, that this is what you've worked so hard, that this is why. If you're truly passionate about it, let us know. And then your systematic and evidence-based process. What is the process to evaluate and revise curriculum? Break that down into 2 categories, internal and external. Internally, how are you going to evaluate your program? That's student evaluations, that's student feedback, that's employee feedback, that's occupation specialists that teach your technical courses, but also the external, the PAC membership, people out in the field, your competitors, people at the local community college. How does that evaluate your program? Also, when your first class comes out, your alumni. And then your program evaluation. What method are you using to evaluate your program? Is that through surveys? Is that through surveys that you send out? Is it electronic? Is it on paper? Is it quarterly? Think of ways to engage the best information. People sometimes get so tired of taking surveys. Maybe the method in this particular field is to pick the phone up and to call John 4 blocks up from your office. When should each component be measured? Initiated by? Benchmark? Documentation? So let me show you what this is doing. Take each of these questions. If you put each of these questions in headers across the top, let me say this again. Each of these questions, and put them as headers in a chart, like in a word chart across the top, it helps start designing your IAIP. I've given you the questions. I'm not saying you have to do it this way, but if you don't know where to go from square one, this is a great way. What's being measured? Column 1. What are we measuring? The faculty qualifications, the fact that intro to welding is needed or not needed. What method is being used? In other words, how am I measuring that? Is it a survey? Is it a verbal? Is it results from the first set of exams? When should that be measured? You don't have to measure every single thing every quarter or semester. Maybe we measure it every December. Maybe we measure it twice a year in April, and we measure it again in September. Who is that initiated by? Is it the program chair? Is that a lead faculty member? What are we hoping to achieve? What's the benchmark or expected level of achievement? And when we did measure it the first time, what did we find? That starts to outline the IAIP for your new program. I just put them in questions to try to get you to think. And then here's just talking a little bit about the PAC. I won't spend a ton of time on this, but I just want to really emphasize again how important it is to have a PAC ahead of time. Here's what happens. Here's what I see in degree applications sometimes. People throw a PAC together because they're like, oh, it's number 10 on the questionnaire. Now I've got to answer this. Let's just try to get about 4 or 5 people, throw them in a room, serve them a box lunch, and ask them some questions. Well, that's like pulling your family together and saying we're going to adopt or have a child and we really don't want feedback at all or your help. Why would you ever do that? That PAC is essential, more essential than any time you'll ever hold a PAC meeting in your entire life. Putting together this particular PAC and having general education or even distance education, if applicable, if you're thinking about putting an initial or an expanded distance ed along with this application as a separate application, there'll never be a more important time to have a robust set of minutes and to really engage PAC members. You know, it can be a PAC to meet the qualifications, but maybe you pull out 3 PAC members and you have a robust discussion again. It doesn't just say you have to submit one set. Again, really think about getting good, thoughtful, robust feedback. And then the student services. Existing services, are they enough? Well, sometimes schools will submit in their application and they'll say, you know what, we've got a real good set of student services, so we're good, everything's good. And I always say, that's good, but we don't know what you have currently. So if you have a very robust student services, I don't know that. So explain that to me. What do you already have? I'm asking you just to get a snapshot to be able to approve your program to say, you know what, from everything you've put on paper, it looks like this program would be successful if you were to launch it tomorrow. Because as a committee member on program review and as a commissioner, that's what I ask myself. If tomorrow you were given the green light and you started this program, would it be successful to get off the ground and to get started? Because the on-site evaluation team is going to come in and do the checks and balances 6, 9, or 12 months later. I'm simply looking at it to say, do I have enough to make an educated judgment that you're strong enough to start this program and to get it off the ground? That's what we want to make sure you have. And then we talked a little bit about the learning resource, about materials to be supportive. One of the best ways to look at that as well is to look at your competitors in your program level review, is to also take a look at their library holdings. What do they offer? Is there maybe a section on their website that they have library listings? Are they have 6 databases available, or do they have printed materials, or is it in the form of videos? What are successful schools with this program using in their own libraries? You certainly don't have to invent the wheel. Today's library looks so different than even when I went to, when I was an undergrad several decades ago. I say several, gosh, that doesn't even seem right. But you know, those were the days of taking the periodical and going to the photocopier and finding page 1,320. Some of you are laughing because you remember this, turning it over, borrowing 14 dimes from a classmate, trying to photocopy it. That's not today's library. Today's library, 24/7, pajamas, 12 midnight, I got the information I need. So consider how that resource system is not only valid on your campus, but what's robust and valid about it if a student needs it at 11 o'clock at night. And this is just going over that standard that talks about the policy and procedure for ongoing development of its Learning Resource Center. Again, look up other people's policies. Sometimes you can get a good example by jumping on and taking a look at what other people have written and what other schools have found successful. They're public policies on many schools' websites. Is it managed by school personnel with sufficient experience? And does it have materials that are truly commensurate with the education provided? And boy, that blue box on the end, that's going to be something that's a checks and balance when an on-site evaluation team comes. It's not enough to have a library. How are you using it? That might be in the form of a master prepared librarian discussing holdings for a research project, coming into the class having to use the learning resource system for a project at a freshman level and a senior level and a sophomore and a junior level. All of those play into that infrastructure of a learning resource center. Now, faculty qualifications. If faculty information is not available, we understand. You can submit specific hiring criteria and a timeline that when your faculty would be hired, and that's fine. But be specific about the ideal candidate for the job. Just because someone teaches doesn't mean they're qualified to be a class expert. And again, we've already talked about this green box. New programs require your A team. You really want to make sure you get some dynamic people. That helps students who are in a new program to feel really excited about being in that program. They tell their friends and their friends' friends and their friends' friends' friends and so on. And that's how that culture of word of mouth becomes that you're the best gig in town to take a degree from. And then meeting the requirement. I will tell you, if you're doing an occupational associate and you are putting academic general education in, make sure you still meet the academic general education requirements for faculty. Sometimes we have schools that miss that. Again, you're putting in an occupational associate and you're not going to teach occupational related general education, but you're going to do academic gen ed. Make sure the faculty qualifications of that individual match the academic qualifications, not the occupational. It's just a little side note of a mistake sometimes I see schools do. And then this is part of the faculty-student interaction piece. And I want to pop in for just a moment because I think this is a real interesting conversation to have here. This is that student advisement piece. What's crucial about starting a new program is that students feel connected with the faculty. The management is, I always say, is the behind-the-scenes stage manager. They're not the people on the front line. It's the faculty and instructors. And so you want to enable and empower these people to be your strongest players because they're hands-on with the students. So you want to make sure you have a clear faculty development plan that includes these new faculty members or enhances your existing faculty members with clear outcomes and clear academic support systems in place. In other words, you'll start to discover where students fall in that program, where they fall short, or where retention problems start to happen. You want to make sure you have a strong academic support plan in place. I think, too, I like to call this anticipating what to encounter, keeping the plate spinning. Here's what happens sometimes. So you put so much time and energy into, same with a family, if you already have a child and a new baby comes along, this has happened in my household before, and all the attention is, oh, the baby, the new baby, the baby, we love the baby. The older child feels left out. You got to be careful. The same is true in a program. Don't make the mistake of putting so much emphasis on the new program that existing programs in your school feel left out. There has to be what I call keep all the plates spinning at the same time. And I think about it in spinning plates because we've been so fast about spinning this plate that we go down here to the existing program and the plate is wobbling like this. All the plates need to be equally spinning. It's a tough challenge. That's why you can't do this in a vacuum. You need a support team, what I call a village of really terrific people at your school to help you get through this. And then spreading your faculty too thin. I would tell you to look at workloads and look what average people teach, because a faculty member who's spread too thin sometimes becomes negative in the classroom. They don't mean to, it just happens. They feel overworked and overwhelmed. And so you don't want that to occur in your particular new program. Management and administration. We've talked a little bit about the sufficient educational administration, the director of education, and the program head. Oftentimes, sometimes the director of education believes he or she can be the program chair. I would just caution you to think about that's a lot of hats to wear, trying to pull together a new program off the ground and trying to keep the daily operations of everything else going. That's a lot. So make sure you're really clear on the job responsibilities and consider having somebody maybe be the program chair that's exceptional and qualified to do nothing but really be good at guiding that new program off the ground. I think meeting degree requirements is needed, obviously, to meet the standard. That's what I talk about when I say about checking it off. But experience is key. Finding somebody that's got all the right qualifications, because it turns the leadership in support staff and the faculty, it pulls them all together to make a successful student and a successful graduate. There has to be a clear organizational chart. Students and faculty and other people need to know where to go if they're experiencing something, because students want their needs met and they want them met now. And how are we going to handle that? Your infrastructure has to be robust enough. So I would ask you to say, if tomorrow we added a new program and we had 200 people in the program, would our infrastructure as is support it? If you're waffling to say yes, well, there's probably a reason. Now, we're going to quickly go through admissions requirements. Just think about this. Numbers don't necessarily equate to success, not when you're starting a brand new program. I mean, yes, there's called we need to make sure that the cash flow makes sense and that we're not building a program that's not going to help the college, the fiscal soundness, robustness of the college or of the school. But don't get so caught up on trying to admit so many people in the first cohort. There's nothing wrong with step-stoning into that, because that first group of individuals, well, I don't want to say they're guinea pigs, but it is a learning process. They're learning to be in a new program. Your faculty are learning. Your management team is learning. Your staff is learning. It's a big change. So don't step into it thinking that you have to have so many people from the get-go. Admission requirements and procedures. In this section of the application, what we're looking for is what is the standard in the proposed field. Is that an entrance exam that students are required to take and be successful on? Is that a testing requirement? Is that an interview? Again, looking at a program level review and looking at your competitors, both regionally, in your community, even across the nation, to see how other people are meeting students in similar fields. And then what we're going to ask you for is a clear outline in a draft catalog presentation. We know that you're working out the checks and the balances in that, but we want to see what that would look like overall if we were to get that degree proposal in, what that catalog piece with that new degree, how it would change your catalog. I'm going to jump back out to finish up here. We talked a little bit about the administrative support staff. One of my colleagues at work has the best saying, and I always like how she says it. She says, it takes a village to get one student through a program. Boy, that is the understatement of the year, isn't it? It does. And it takes all of these pieces here: career services, student services, financial aid, admissions, registrar, management. Do you have a staff that is supportive of the proposed program? The best way to have a staff that's supportive of the program is to give them a voice. See, we typically, and I'm going to jump on here to show you in a visual, we typically write from the top down. The same is true with our SER, administration down to this pyramid piece. But what if you flipped the pyramid to where the bottom of the pyramid is involved from the top down? In other words, what if people in student services had a voice in writing the application with 13 questions, their section of it? The admissions had a role. The financial aid had a role. Career placement had a role. Just because someone writes an answer doesn't mean you can't take that answer and make it more robust or build into it. But it starts everybody on the same page. Everybody has a voice in how they want this program to be successful. What people help to create, people will always help to maintain. Not only that, but it shows trust and it empowers your people to really do something extraordinary. That's probably the most exciting part. Okay, finishing up here. Only if an externship is applicable to the program, successful design, successful externship. What we're looking for is a written training plan. I have a lot of people that ask a question, what is a written training plan? What we're looking for here is syllabi with a timeline, with objectives and goals that are clearly met with oversight in a clinical or an externship rotation if applicable to your program, and that it's supervised and coordinated by a qualified individual. So not that students are going and sort of structuring that their own, that there's a good structured blueprint. That's what we're looking for. And then this just shows you what happens visually when it all comes together, because that's the #1 reason we do the job that we do, is we want to make sure that we are always considering student needs and, well, student success. That's why you do the job you do every day. And I know when I talk to many of you across the nation at professional development conference and other activities, I'm always told the same answer. I cry at graduation. Students are so special to me. I can't believe it. I've seen someone transform their life. You're right. And transforming a life begins at program inception, designing it professionally, correctly, and designing it to where it can be so dynamic that you are still changing lives every day and you have a hand in that. I can't think of a better way to spend your workday than to know that you have a part in that at your school. So let me talk a little bit, just real quick, housekeeping things about the logical timeline. Sometimes schools submit an application and they, when's it coming back? When's it coming back? When's it coming back? Well, it all depends on the submission date, how long it takes. It goes to a program review committee, and then it goes on to the commission, or it might need to go back to you for additional information. So we usually say at least 60 days. Don't try to rush the process. It sounds like putting a new degree program together. You have two options to look at it. The glass is half empty, and we have to fill out this 13-question application and jump through these hoops. But it's not really empty. It's half full. When you think about, I've logically planned this out, I've created and anticipated everything that students need, and I feel confident going forward. The best laid plans always win the race. Now here's the actions that the program review can take before it goes to the full commission. Approve it, and this is the actions the commission can take as well. Approved with an on-site evaluation for all first-time and unrelated degree programs. That's an automatic. Approved with stipulations. Okay, we're approving it, but we need you to submit X, Y, and Z. They're pretty easy. You forgot a faculty qualification for Jim Smith or Connie Thompson. Approved with a program implementation closure. We're asking you for information back. It's possible to defer it. We just don't feel like you're quite ready. We're struggling to feel like it's still going to be successful right now, or deny. Let me say, if you receive a defer back, that is not the end of the world. If anything, consider it okay, now I get it. I've got to add more to it. If you're still struggling with understanding, make sure you contact the ACCSC staff. They are so willing and able to help you with this process and to make sure that you're successful. Now, for more information to enhance your school's educational experience, you know that we have a lot of resources available. I think some of the best resources in town. We've got maximizing program advisory committees all the way down to that IAIP implementation. They are free. They're available on the website for acc.org, and they are easily downloaded with /resources. You can click on any of them, and you'll find that they're at your fingertips. As a matter of fact, not even a bad idea to have a competition of who can explain one of the monograph series in your office for a $10 Starbucks gift card. I know the people I work with, they love to have a little healthy competition. So that's something else to consider. I want to say thank you for staying a little bit longer with me. Can you believe? I know my family would say, oh, Julie, close it. That's a wrap. Cut it off. I could talk all day, literally. I could talk all day. So let me tell you how excited I am that you're even considering putting a new degree program into your school. The fact that you're stepping into that, well, it's just like stepping day one into a gym. You've taken the hard step. You've already gotten yourself through the gym door. Now it's what you're going to do with the free weights and the machines. That's where we come in to help. We want you to be successful, and we want to help you. So if you have any questions, send them on, and we'll get those answered from staff. Or, even better, come network with us. Come see us face-to-face at the Professional Development Conference. More information is available about that on the website and how to register for that. Go on and get that early bird deal in, okay? September 25th through the 27th. And we're celebrating something pretty spectacular. 50 years never looks so good. We actually have 50 years celebration coming forward for ACCSC. 50,000 reasons to celebrate, and we want you to be a part of it. And finally, I do look forward to the opportunity when you and I can meet in person, and I wish you a lot of success at your individual schools. And I thank you for spending, well, some coffee chat time with me today. So until we talk again, this is Julie Bosler signing off, saying thank you so much and wishing you lots of success and lots of happiness in your school. Send all of your students and graduates my very best. Thanks. Bye-bye.